Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is veteran strength and conditioning coach Matt Nichol. Matt has trained professional and elite amateur athletes since the late 1990s, working with numerous individuals, teams, and organizations such as the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club, the San Francisco 49ers, the Russian Ice Hockey Foundation, and Team Canada's World Cup of Hockey 2004 gold medalists. As well as leading Canada's premier off-season hockey camps for NHL and elite amateur players, Matt is a founding partner at BioSteel Sports Supplements.
So Matt, welcome to heaven.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
We were talking earlier. I was trying to remember how long it's been since you and I met and started being friends, and you taking my classes, and you told me it was 20 years ago.
Actually, I think 20 might be 21 this year, I believe.
21, that's a while.
Yeah.
We got history, baby. So I'm excited to share your journey with everybody today. For those of you that don't know, Matt is well recognized as probably the most successful strength coach in all of Canada, and maybe even further than that. You've trained more professional athletes than anybody in all of Canada, from what I've been told.
I'm not sure about that, but I've trained a few anyway, that's for sure. Yeah.
You know, what I want to do today, just because I like to take people that have achieved a lot of success like yourself and share how their journey unfolds so that younger people or people who feel confused about what their life is meaning to them or where it's taking them can see that the path to becoming successful comes with all sorts of interesting challenges and ups and downs. So I'm going to use the hero's journey as sort of the archetype or the structure of our journey today, and it has three main features: the departure, so leaving home and going out into the world; the initiation, the process you went through to become the man that ultimately developed all sorts of high caliber athletes and still does; and then the return. That means, what did you take from those lessons that you got that made you who you are and return them back into the world, which ultimately is the gift that you give all these athletes. So just give us a sort of a quick overview of the teams that you've worked for. Tell us in a synopsis of what's your history, your professional history with your athletics, your strength coaching, who you've worked for, consulted for, so that we can start right out of the gate with everybody having a realization, okay, this guy's definitely got some major accomplishments.
Okay, well, I was an athlete myself, and then when I got into coaching, I initially worked privately and worked for other people, worked at a physiotherapy clinic, worked at a regular gym, but it was always my desire, my goal to work with elite level athletes and help them with their training and their rehab and all that sort of stuff. My first official team job was with the Toronto Maple Leafs as a NHL hockey team in where I live now, the place I call home in Toronto, Canada. And I've done quite a bit of consulting with a number of other teams, some governing bodies. I did work for Team Canada at a World Cup of Hockey. I've worked for the Russian Olympic Committee and the Russian Ice Hockey Federation. I've done consulting for teams in the Canadian Football League and the National Football League and a wide variety of athletes privately. Now I have a little gym in Toronto, my own little private business, where predominantly it's hockey players. That's for sure. That's the biggest part of our business. But we have freestyle skiers and bobsledders and NFL football players and NBA basketball players and ballet dancers and just kind of everything under the sun. We've got a little bit of everything that we see on a day-to-day basis now in the gym.
So that shows right away that your approach to strength and conditioning or developing an athlete is diverse. You can apply the model that you use to pretty much any athlete.
Yeah, no, and you know, in large measure, the model that I used is the model that I've learned from you, and I think that that's probably the thing that's made me most effective. Is that I do train a lot of NHL hockey players. Probably more than many other people, but I'm not a hockey player. I never was. In fact, I can't even skate. I've trained principal dancers with the National Ballet of Canada, and you have to take my word for it. That's certainly not my area of expertise. I'm not,
I haven't seen you doing pirouettes.
You wouldn't be surprised to find out that I wasn't a successful ballet dancer. But the point is, at the end of the day, regardless of what their sport or occupation is, they're humans.
Right.
And the principles that I've learned from you are the ones that have been the foundation of my business, and that's that. Regardless of whether they play in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball, or whether they're in the world of finance or a stay-at-home mom, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're human beings.
Yes. That
want to move and feel and be happy and healthy. So that's the core of the system that we use.
That's exciting. Tell us about your earlier developmental years. What were some of the dreams or aspirations you had as a child, a teenager, and what was the family dynamics like? Were there challenges or things that you look back on now? And for example, my father was a real hard ass, and at the time it was extremely challenging, but I look back and say, if he hadn't taught me how to work and really get a job done and quit complaining, I never would have been able to build the CHEK Institute. If my mother wasn't highly creative and ability to adapt even in times of high stress, I would not have had the creativity to think outside of the box. So if you look at your childhood and think, okay, here I am now at 44. So you look back and say, what were the seeds that were planted and what were the challenges that I had to work through that ultimately gave me the strength, the character, and the awareness to be who I am today?
Yeah, well, I think, my parents, if you look at a yin and a yang or a complementary system of parenting, I think they were a great example of that. My parents are both teachers, which, so obviously I think I come by it a little bit naturally. My brother's was a teacher, now he's a principal. I come from a family of teachers, so... but my parents were probably the best complementary team that I could have had. My mother, who's passed now, was a beautiful person, very loving, very tender, very caring kindergarten teacher. But if I was raised only by her, I probably would be in jail right now, or maybe, I don't know, maybe if there was mixed martial arts, or back in those days, maybe I would have done that, or maybe I would have followed your path and gone into some kind of crazy extreme sports or something like that. But my father was a very serious guy, very stern guy, and in a good way. Also, I think that my dad has a wonderful sense of humor, which I got from him. He has a love of history, which I got from him. Those things are great, but he was also a guy that he was that. The walk softly and carry a big stick. He was the big stick. So I think I needed that in my life. So I think they were. It was great for me because I both of those forces were important. I lived. I was a fairly good kid because I knew if I wasn't, I knew what was coming, and and my mom was there to make sure that it was nurturing, and that was a great setup that way. And I think they always. Being teachers and being passionate about what they did, that was impressed upon me about the value of being a teacher and the importance of that. And I think that's something that I aspired to be like them in that regard. So
yeah, well, that's the archetype of the teacher. I remember in conversations with you, you've said to me, "I'm not a famous athlete. I'm not this, but I am a teacher." And so that is the archetype. The universal idea of the teacher lives in you, and clearly your family grounded you in those qualities so that you could express that in your own life.
Yeah.
What was going on in you, and about when did it happen that you realized you had to break away from your family and go off on your own? What were the events and the forces that led you to that, I've got to do this experience, so that you weren't under the rule of mom and dad anymore. You weren't a kid. You had to go off into enter the adult world.
Well, I was always passionate about sports and played a lot of them, but the one that I was successful at was football. And so I had an opportunity to go away and go to school and go to a great university and play on the team there. But it was far away from home. It was 6 or 7 hour drive away from home. It was not another planet, but it was far enough away. And I think I just knew in the city that I grew up in, we had two fantastic universities, very well regarded, that were literally right down the street from my house. So. It wasn't a necessity, for someone to go out of town. I could have stayed home, but I just felt this need in me to get out and get a change of scenery, a new environment, and challenge myself that way. So that was sort of the first time in my life where I had to really kind of move away. And at 18 years old, I was living by myself, in Canada. It was in a province where it's predominantly French speaking, in Montreal and Quebec. So,
okay.
So that was the first time in my life, to be 18 years old and living on your own, away from home, brand new, new team, new school, new environment, all this sort of thing. So it was a great experience for me because if I had not have done it at that age, I would have been much less likely to do it. I'd moved to, Toronto later when I graduated from university, which is the biggest city in my country. And it's a big, thriving metropolis. I think we're maybe the third or fourth biggest city in North America now. So that would have been probably too scary a thing to do had I not at least had that stepping stone and left when I was 18.
Yeah, you had to get off the hind tit and, and when people don't, they can stay stuck in the child archetype. It's too easy to get mommy and daddy's help or family's help. So it would have been easy for me. My mom was that kind of person. They would always be there if we didn't have they weren't rich people, but I was rich in love and affection and caring, and they would have done anything they could have. Yeah.
I think it kind of forced me to grow up and develop some skills that I needed to be successful in my professional career.
Yeah. So when you got to university and you played football, somewhere there was a call to adventure. Somewhere there was this realization that strength coaching or working with athletes nourishes something in me, that something was pulling you in that direction. What were the events that led to the realization that was your call to adventure?
Well, I was probably started going to a gym by the age of 14, or certainly by 15, and I would say probably from the age of 16 on, I was at the gym literally 7 days a week. I worked out every single day. Now, I mean, very ineffective, like pretty comical if I look back on how bad it was, but that was just something that I did, and I think a lot of that was because sports were so important to me, because I identified, they changed my life.
Right.
It gave me a tribe to belong to. It gave me value. All of a sudden, people admired me or respected me in my little community because I was good at that. So I had figured out pretty early on that this going to the gym was enhanced that. So that was always very important to me. And I also, realized very early on, and this is an important point to make, because I'm maybe, I don't know, a little bit older than the average, personal trainer now, or maybe your audience, and you'll appreciate this, maybe some won't. There was no internet back then. There was no social media, none of this stuff. So if you wanted to, when I was going to the gym and trying to figure out what to do, there wasn't a website I could go to. No. There wasn't someone I could follow on Instagram and watch what they did. So if you wanted to get better, eventually you had to work up the courage and have the balls to go ask some guy in the gym who looked like they knew what they were doing, and hopefully they did. And hopefully they were kind enough to give you a little bit of their time. So I realized early on how important and effective coaching was for me. I had guys that were kind enough to give me a few tips and tidbits, and all of a sudden you'd see results get better. And I thought, oh, geez, there's more to this than just going to this place and doing stuff. Seeking out experts in this field can enhance my performance. So I've always, that idea of the value of experts in your field being able to help you enhance your performance, I was always sold on that. But when I got to university, I was a good player on the field, but I I think I was probably even better in the gym. I always was, I had good numbers on our testing and all these sorts of things. And I trained, in a way now that I wish if I could go back in time and do it all over, I wish that I could. But I took great pride in the amount of weight that I had on the bar or the number of reps that I could do on something. But towards the end of my time playing university football, I was repeatedly getting injured, but it wasn't usually playing football. It was the training that I was doing for the football, and eventually got to the point where I was dealing with these really, really serious chronic injuries. And I was convinced that there had to be a better way. I was putting in so much effort that there must be a different way to do things. And I actually had, it's at that time that I met Paul Gagne, who was a student of yours at the time. And he turned me on to a lot of the ideas that, that you were teaching and talking about. And it really resonated with me because at that time I thought, well, I'm putting so much effort into this. I'm working so hard, but why am I always hurt all the time? Why am I always sore all the time? There must be a better way.
So at this point, were you actually doing strength and conditioning for other athletes?
No, this is all just for my own personal gain to be better myself.
So what was the tipping point where something inside you said, this is what I want to do for the world?
So I think at that, when I was in university, we had a strength and conditioning coach, but you have to keep in mind, this is 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's in Canada, where the industry, he was a guy who was trying his best, but we all knew that he really didn't know exactly what he was doing. And I would go home in the summertime and I would train with a powerlifting club. And I would sprint with a track and field team, and I would come back and I would do really well on our. I would squat a lot of weight and I'd sprint a fast time and jump a height, but it was by doing different types of training than what everybody else was doing. So a number of my teammates kind of got together and said, "Hey, can you show us the stuff that you're doing?" So it really wasn't. I wasn't their coach.
Yeah.
But it was me just sharing information that I had gathered from other people.
Right.
With this group of guys, and the kind of cool thing was that we had about 5 of us that trained together as a little training group all the time. 4 of those guys went on to play professionally. 2 of these guys played in the NFL. A couple of these guys played in the Canadian Football League. And when their season was over, I was just watching them like a fan, but they started to call me and hit me up and say, "Hey, can you write some of those workouts?" And now I was no longer playing. I was teaching high school. I was, in coaching high school sports. But they said, "Hey, can you write some more of those workouts?" Because wherever we went with our team, the workouts weren't really as good as the ones that we used to do.
Right.
So it was all of these things were sort of happening at the same time. Where my career had finished, but I had become enamored with your teaching and the things that I was learning from you. And so I started to say, okay, well, what if I could take the things that worked for me from the powerlifting club, the things that worked for me from my sprint coaches, all these new things that I'm learning from Paul, and started, kind of weave them all together. And these former teammates of mine really enjoy it. They got a good benefit. So there was never any intention to do this as a business. I didn't think I didn't know there was such a thing. I didn't know you could be a personal trainer for athletes in Canada. I thought that was just for Hollywood celebrities or famous, people. But so it was really, it kind of came from a pure place. I just, I enjoyed teaching. I was passionate about sports. I was passionate about strength training and performance training and all that sort of stuff, and just sort of combined it with this little group of guys. And that's kind of how I guess my career started.
So you've kind of alluded a little bit to the next stage in the hero's journey, which is meeting the mentor. So once you got into this and it started to click for you, you must have had this urge to know more. Ultimately you said Paul Gagne turned you on to my stuff. So when you look back on the mentors, can you sort of share a little bit about who were the mentors, the people that really had the most influence on how you view your profession and how you practice it? What were if you said, wow, if I look at all the great teachers that have influenced me, here's what I learned from each of the key ones, who would they be? Can you sort of unfold absolutely. That story?
Well, I've been very fortunate, very blessed. I've had lots of great, teachers, coaches, like I'm sure lots of people have throughout the way. And I don't think you have enough time on your podcast to go through every single person that's helped me. There's been so many.
Yeah, maybe take the 4 or 5 key ones.
I would say the first one is not someone that's probably ever going to listen to the podcast, and they don't do this for a living, but I remember being, 19 years old, and I had been going to the YMCA and then the local university, but it was the first time I actually went and joined a real powerlifting gym, and I paid my membership, and I went in, and I remember, I've told this story before, but sitting on that, the old Nautilus neck machine.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who would come at the same time as me, and he was this little fire hydrant of a guy, super, big, strong, muscular looking guy, and a very mean, intimidating looking guy. And I always tried to avoid making eye contact with him, but I noticed on that day in particular, he kept kind of staring at me, and eventually this guy kind of walked over and was standing right beside me, just staring at me, and I remember, looking at him, and he said, "Kid, what the hell are you doing?" and I said, and I didn't say anything at first, and he said, "I see you in here every day. What are you training for?" And I told him, "Well, I'm training for football." And he said, "Well, what are you doing that for?" And I said, "Well, because I want to get bigger neck and shoulders." And he said, "If you want to get stronger for football, be here tomorrow at 5:00 and come find me." And now I didn't know this at the time, but Jeff was he's still a record holder in Canada in powerlifting.
Wow.
He's got records in all different weight classes and Masters champion. He's one of the best powerlifters ever to come out of our country. But he wasn't my personal trainer or my strength coach. He wasn't in business. He had a job. This is just, for whatever reason, he took pity on me that day or felt sorry for me, and that was. The little things that he showed me, and the few times that he actually worked with me and showed me a few things in the gym, my numbers in the weight room just skyrocketed in the next year, and I started training like a powerlifter, which was great. I was putting up big numbers in the gym, and it was very impressive to people in the gym. My performance on the field improved, but then I noticed over time I started to get a lot of little nagging injuries because like anyone at that age, if a little bit is good, then a whole lot more is even better.
Yeah.
I was reading a lot of books by Tudor Bompa, which helped me to take a bit of a scientific approach to my training. So that was an early influence. But the next biggest influence and most profound influence on my career was being turned on to to your teachings, and that I have to give Paul Gagne credit for that.
Yeah.
But that was really, at the time, I could, deadlift almost 600 pounds, but I couldn't do 2 proper chin-ups.
Right.
I could squat, 525 or something like that. But I couldn't string together 1 month of training without blowing my back out or hurting my hips or so. It was really kind of an eye opener to me when a lot of the little basic exercises that Paul showed me, that were stuff that he learned from you, that I was just so incredibly imbalanced. I was just. It kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there is more to it, and I started to read everything that I could get my hands on that you wrote, and then eventually, in 1999, I did my level 1. I saved up every penny that I had and closed down my bank account. I literally had a balance of 0 and had to borrow a few bucks from my mom to help me get out and take my level 1 course. And
that's a pretty common story, the story of people coming to take my courses, and they sell cars and borrow money, and they're flat broke, and they show up, and if they go out and apply it, they end up, really making something. So when when you took my training, I was teaching all those classes. How many of your classes was with me?
Well, I've done my level 1, and back then there was NLC before HLC,
Right.
So and I did quite a few of them I did several times.
Oh yeah, good idea.
Which partly my own insecurity of not feeling like I got it enough the first time around. But anytime I had a chance to hear you speak, I took it. I just and you'll even remember I used to bring when I was working for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I would bring a lot of the NHL players, and they'd come and sit in the classes too and take notes. And so I don't know how many different seminars or lectures or courses I've sat through, but it's quite a few.
Yeah, that's exciting, and so that's you had that powerlifting background, you had that high intensity strength training. So really, it sounds to me like what I gave you was the concept of how to balance the body and understand the importance of working the stabilizer systems, the postural systems, or what we call the inner systems of the body, or just like. You could say the big muscles are like the engine, but the stabilizers in the inner systems are like the suspension and the brakes. And if you have a lot of horsepower, but you can't stop or turn, you're gonna crash, which is what was happening to you. So how much of an aspect of your training of elite athletes today is that foundation training on balancing the athlete out, and how much of those exercises are you still using today?
Yeah, well, it's everything. It's my core values. It's the foundational principles. But I think if I look back at the sort of progression of my relationship with you and also my understanding of what you do, originally it was I was motivated to learn because what I was doing was no longer working. I was in pain. I wasn't getting results anymore. I was hurt all the time. So that was the original motivation, was just to get out of pain,
right,
and get back to doing exactly what I had been doing. That was the motivation. But along the way, and having met you, I realized, and seeing the things that you could do in a gym, I thought, well, holy shit, this guy's not just some physiotherapist or rehab person. This guy's unbelievably strong. So I thought, okay, well, wait a minute.
That's when I was young and I was strong.
but my at that time, being a 22-year-old guy at that point in time, I was still enamored with that. So if your sales pitch was only Paul Chek is really good with rehab exercises and can get you out of pain, I probably would have followed it along to the point of the story where I was out of pain, and that would have been the end of the journey. But because I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm enamored with being strong and powerful in the gym. Okay, so I always thought I had to make a choice.
Right.
Do I do the stuff that's going to help me get bigger and stronger, or do I do the stuff that's going to make me healthier?
Yeah.
I thought you had to choose between the two. And so I realized it's actually not a choice at all. The stuff that I'm supposed to do to make me healthier could actually make me stronger.
Yeah.
And then I remember at one point when I had got to know you a little bit, and I was still just purely fascinated with the exercise. We sat down one day and we were having what's now known as bulletproof coffee 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You're the first person I ever heard, or thought had seen do that.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me, and you said, hey, but by the way, just so you know, it has nothing to do with the exercises. It's all about your nutrition and your health. And that was, my level of understanding or care about nutrition was making sure I ate enough protein. That was, period, end of sentence. So once I understood that, that was a mind-blowing, moment for me. And I became enamored with that and really passionate about nutrition. Then I remember a few years down the road, you said, hey, remember, how I told you it's not about the exercise, it's about the nutrition? It's actually not about that either. It's about your spiritual, emotional, mental strength. And that's the key. And if you have that, so I think if anything now, I've tried my best to encompass all those things, but instead of making my athletes go on a 15-year journey like I did, I kind of let them know from day one, yes, we're going to do exercises. Yes, we're going to get stronger. Yes, but in order for that to happen, we have to talk about your nutrition. We have to talk about, mental and emotional, don't always get into spiritual day one. I think you got to earn that with your athletes, but
yeah. And you're sensitive to that.
But yeah, so that's it's absolutely the core values, and that's especially at that time, there are a million guys out there that are more proficient in teaching Olympic style weightlifting, or there's many coaches that are better at teaching powerlifting. There's guys that are bigger and stronger. There's guys that have more expertise in the technical aspects of any of these sports. But what I've tried to do is say, okay, well, my differentiating factor is going to be this. I'm going to make these guys healthier. I'm going to make them healthier people while training for strength, while training for speed, while doing all those things, which obviously they're important. But if I can keep these guys healthy,
it's sustainable.
Absolutely. And that was my differentiating factor. And that's sort of what I really think propelled my career.
Yeah. I look back, you and I have had some fun workouts together. When I'd come to Toronto, I'd get a hold of you and I'd say, hey, I need a place to go lift some heavy weights. I remember one time you took me to some gym where there's like huge dumbbells. And
we had our contest, yeah.
Yeah, and so you and I got into it. But, for me, it was very important as a teacher to exemplify to my students that I wasn't just a talking head and that I could demonstrate evidence of what I was doing. But you and I have had some pretty damn good ball buster workouts together.
Oh my God. I think, and this is so again, it shouldn't matter, when I was 22 years old, it shouldn't have mattered to me whether or not you could do anything in the gym. That shouldn't have mattered at all, right? But it did. That resonated with me, and that got my attention and made me listen to other things. So I think at the end of the day, like, with my athletes, for example, because I show them that I can make them stronger and faster, they're more likely to listen to me when I say, oh, hey, by the way, let's talk about sleep.
Yeah.
Let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about emotional health. If I came out of the gate with those, I don't know that they would have listened. So automatically, me seeing you and the things that you could do in the gym, I wasn't going to question. I mean, I don't know how the hell you did those things, but but if you're telling me it's because of sleep, okay, then it's because of sleep, and I'm on board. So, and I think of like, Jesus, people don't believe some of this stuff when I tell them, but I remember you doing like overhead walking lunges in a pair of Birkenstock sandals with 100 kilos on the barbell overhead.
Yeah, I used to do overhead walking lunges with 255 on the bar.
I remember the day we did it, and it was at a Good Life Fitness Club, which is a public commercial gym for anyone who's not from Canada, and in there with your Birkenstock sandals and 225 pounds on the bar. And I mean, the crowd of people, I think there's some people were afraid you were going to kill yourself.
That happens too.
Some people just standing in awe. I could think of we had a workout one time here at the old gym in the Institute.
Yeah.
And it was 20 lunges, 20 front squats, 20 back squats, 20, 20, 20. It was this lactate capacity workout that you did.
Lactate workout.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be with body weight, and I think my body weight at the time was about 245.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of it, I was using your body weight and couldn't move anymore, and you were using my body weight and crushing it. And single arm chin ups or cleaning and jerking your body weight overhead for reps with a dumbbell, just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So we've had some good workouts.
So the next stage of the hero's journey is that there's tests and there's allies and there's resistances. What are some of the tests where you've found yourself being really challenged or facing resistance from other people who maybe were jealous of your success or didn't like you? And there's always politics wherever you go, especially in professional sports. What are some of the challenges you've had to work through, and if you hadn't to work through them, you would not be where you're at today?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I think I think that all along the way, I think that you're always going to deal with some obstacles or some people that give you challenges. And I was the guy in 1997 walking to the gym with my own Swiss ball because gyms didn't have Swiss balls, and so obviously lots of comments and lots of people talking behind your back, or sometimes not behind your back, sometimes right to your face. And, so that's that. There's lots and lots of that. But I think from a professional standpoint, getting fired from my job in the NHL and it wasn't just it was funny. I did an interview with Scott Livingston not too long ago. He was a good friend of mine, and he was talking about being let go. And I said, well, I didn't get let go. I got fired.
I didn't even realize that. What was, it's kind of paradoxical because you brought these guys to incredible levels of fitness. You even had me come in and consult when you guys were having some challenges on the team that no one really knew what to do or how to figure out. But I watched you develop that conditioning system into a very, very elaborate, beautiful system, and really tracking and using great technologies. So what led to them letting you go? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think I was the history of that team that I worked for. They had been unsuccessful for a very long time. And then they had brought in a new coach who was the coach and the general manager, so he had ultimate authority what went on. He's the guy that hired me. And they went from being very unsuccessful to very successful for a long period of time, but we never ultimately won the championship. So I think that inevitably it's only a matter of time where you come close but you don't win. People are convinced that there must be a different way to do it. Mm-hmm. And we had brought in another coaching regime that I was kept on. The next regime that came through, we changed a little bit, but they kind of stuck to it. We, again, weren't successful. And then they finally brought in another coaching staff. And I think it was basically like, if I said the grass is green and the sky is blue, that was wrong. The grass was blue and the sky was green. So I really don't. I think it was a matter of they just wanted to change everything. Blow like
Clean house,
blow it up,
over.
clean it house.
Yeah.
So, but I think the staff that was brought in, we had very, very, very strong philosophical differences about not only the X's and O's of how you do the training, but just how you treat people. And
Right.
so I was sort of collateral damage, I think, with all that stuff.
But did it work for them?
No, they actually were incredibly unsuccessful. So they ended up getting fired. And it's good. That team now has really turned it around. They got a good approach and they're doing good things there. But for me at the time, it was not just losing the job. It was very public. I think it was on the front page of the sports. It was, it was humiliating in a lot of ways, especially because I felt like, you had given so much of yourself, like so much of your time and effort and the passion to try to make things better. So that was a really hard moment. But, when I look back in retrospect, if it had not been for that, I would not have gone off on my own and worked privately. It would have been a very easy job to do forever.
Yes.
The pay was decent. Your notoriety, you feel very cool walking around town with that job title. It was very, for your ego, it was a great thing. But because of that, it forced me to go and start my own private business. It gave me the opportunity to leave and start my company BioSteel, which I would never have done if I was still there. I would have been bound to keep it exclusive to the team. So
in the hero's journey, you have accepting the call. You've accepted the call to become the strength coach. You've become very successful. But within that, there is the issue of facing demons. So here's an example of a demon. It sounds to me like your pride was attacked when you lost your job like that. But you're also showing that your strength of character was that, okay, so I've lost my job as the strength coach for a famous hockey team where I've really established a lot, grown a lot, and helped a lot of people. But how do I continue from here? And so there's an example where if a person doesn't tap into themselves and look for the opportunity and trust in themselves, then they can be deflated. And next thing you know, they're drinking too much alcohol or pushing a broom because they've lost faith in themselves. So you really come face to face with your own inner demons. When you went through that process, what were some of the inner demons that you had to wrestle with?
Well, I think, it came to a point where I would say asked, but I think I was told more than asked to, that we were going to we were going to change the way that we train the athletes. And it really became more about punishment. And we were going to do, like putting these guys on stationary bikes for an hour and burying them and doing all these different sorts of work,
training them to hate exercise.
Yeah.
Basically.
And a lot of times it was framed exactly as that, as we're going to show that guy, you take him in there and you bury him and you make him hurt and you do this sort of, and it was just stuff that it got to a point where, for me to stay in that job, to do those things, I felt like, I had to stand up because at the end of the day, it was more, I felt like I had first and foremost a professional responsibility, not just to stick to the principles that I thought were important, but I really believe that the things that I was being asked to do were bad for the individual players, but more importantly, I really believe that they actually were going to hinder our chance of being successful. So I wasn't being disobedient out of disrespect.
No.
I just simply said I really believe that this is the wrong path.
Right.
And I took a stand, and at the end of the day, shit rolls downhill, and I was at the bottom of it. So, I was the easy guy to get rid of. So I think that. But it was a good moment for me because I think there were a number of the players that respected the fact that I had done that. There were a number of players that weren't on our team that had heard about it and respected the fact that I took a stand on behalf of what I felt was best for them, and inevitably it worked out. It worked out for the best for me. Mm-hmm. So that was something I think. But again, just knowing that in that process, I did lose a lot of friends. There was a lot of people, when you work, it would be the equivalent if you've got viewers that are in the United States, it would be the equivalent of working for the New York Yankees or the LA Lakers, or if you're, overseas, maybe Manchester United or AC Milan or one of these famous things. So you don't wait for line. You don't wait in line anywhere. You don't have to worry about getting a table.
Yeah, it's a red carpet.
No,
it's a elite kind of movie star type existence.
Even if you're just one of the the support staff, the peons, you still live that lifestyle. So I did lose a lot of friends. There was a lot of people that as soon as I our suppliers that you would deal with that were your great friend because you're purchasing their products. As soon as you're not purchasing anymore, well, they don't they don't call you so often. As soon as you weren't a part of that, you weren't as cool as you were the day before, and that was really hard. I think not so much because of the loss of the perks, but the fact that I realized that a lot of those people maybe weren't really my friend. They just liked that association, and so that was hurtful.
Yeah.
But you know what? It certainly thinned the herd, and I knew that the people that were still around that were my true friends, and that was good.
So I imagine a lot of the athletes that you were standing up for ultimately became your clients when you started training on your own.
Yeah, which was great.
So the loyalty ultimately was the rescue, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, you mentioned BioSteel, but you really haven't told us what BioSteel was. What was your inspiration for BioSteel, and what does BioSteel do? Yeah,
well, so, you know what? Again, a lot of this comes back to you because you asked before another question about mentors. So I'd have to say that my first job after I finished university and I was working in training, but I started working for Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale.
Mm-hmm, yes,
brilliant guy. Who's
very, very highly intelligent.
Who was also the strongest guy in the world in powerlifting, in addition to being a medical doctor and lecturing at university and one of the smartest guys with regards to biochemistry that I've met. But and through him I met another guy who to this day is one of my closest friends and a mentor, Dr. Eric Serrano, who's also a good friend of yours.
Yeah.
So it really was kind of a culmination of the things that I had learned from the three of you, but in particular, everything you taught me about the importance of the circadian cycles, circadian rhythms, and sleep patterns, and then I realized when I started working for the team that at 7 o'clock or 7:30 at night, when we're supposed to be winding down and getting ready for bed, these guys were hammering down high sugar and/or high caffeine sports drinks to get them revved up and ready for the game, which may or may not have had any kind of short-term benefit, and it would seem obvious that they do have a short-term benefit, but in some cases I don't think that, but I
it's hacking the system though.
But I can assure you that there was long-term detriment.
Of
that
course.
I knew. So
that had to do with you calling me in.
Absolutely. So 100%. So this was my dilemma, is that I was the guy dispensing all of these things. That was part of my job. And I realized, okay, well, listen, I've got a huge philosophical problem with this, but just telling them don't do it isn't going to cut it.
No, because it was already in our culture, amongst the athletic culture.
100%. So I had to sit and I had to say, okay, well, why are they doing this? Mm-hmm. What's the reason? Okay, well, they're drinking these high sugar, quote unquote, sports drinks.
Yeah.
Because they're told that they need electrolyte replacement. Yeah. Okay. Well, what are electrolytes?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I know. So they need these electrolytes. Okay. Mm-hmm. And why then the sugar? Well, because they need this energy. Otherwise, they're going to crash. They're going to bonk. Remember that you were a triathlete. They talked about bonking.
Yeah.
Back then. And I started to do some research into that and say, okay, is this actually a thing? I don't. Yeah. So. And then the caffeine, because they need to have energy and they need to be alert and focused. So I thought, okay, how can I satisfy those needs? And now those are the reasons that they say they're using it.
Yes.
I think sometimes they're using it because it tastes good.
Yeah.
They're bored.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about pro athletes, or if anyone who's listening who's been in that world, it's almost seems comical, but it's true. These guys spend all day sitting in that dressing room.
Yeah.
They get bored. They want to train. I remember. I'll never forget. We always had. I don't want to bash any other companies. So we had very the most popular sports drink, but we only had it in one color. So everyone drank this color of the beverage, and then we got two colors. We had an orange one and a blue one, and we went through a pretty even amount of orange and blue. And I remember the company that distributed this product. They arrived one day with a whole skid full of green and tropical rain and Arctic frost and all these different, and our life became a nightmare after that, because all of a sudden these guys, last night they had a green one and they scored a goal. Tomorrow they had a purple one. And it was, so I think that the reasons that they told me they needed these products were different than the reasons they were actually consuming them. But when I was able to isolate, okay, is there a way that I can provide them with electrolytes without artificial sugar, artificial flavors, artificial colors? Absolutely there is, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way that I can help them to be alert and focused, which is the reason they're consuming some of those caffeinated beverages, without using CNS stimulants? Yes,
Right.
yes, there is. There's other things we can use. Is there a way that I can keep them from crashing and bonking and losing energy without using all that refined sugar? Yeah, there is. So when we could put all that all together, we were able to say, okay, listen, just try this. And as you alluded to before, we were doing in-game heart rate every game. So
Yeah.
we were doing, which now you can no longer do. You're not allowed to do that anymore. But we were doing it at the time. We were measuring blood lactates before, during, and after the game. We were using the omega wave to measure heart rate variability before and after games and before and after practices. We were doing urinalysis, blood analysis. Dr. DiPasquale and Dr. Serrano would look at blood labs and all these salivary tests. I was talking to you on a regular basis, reviewing all these cases. So it wasn't just random, it wasn't just, this was actually pretty good clinical research.
Yeah, it was very scientific. I was very impressed with what you put together. Having consulted for a lot of professional teams, you were way ahead of your time. One of the only people I know that reached that level of proficiency and integration is a level 4 CHEK practitioner named Greg Muller, who I'll be interviewing as well. But he was the strength coach for the All Blacks, the Auckland Blues, and another team. But he was the first strength coach in the world, in the history of a professional rugby, to be the champion, the strength coach for all 3 professional teams in each of the leagues. There's 3 professional leagues. He was the strength coach for the team that won each championship in the same year. I got a picture of him on my wall with all the championship trophies, which has never ever been done in the history of rugby. But because I knew Greg and you didn't, and I knew what you were doing, and I knew what he was doing, and you guys didn't know each other, and I didn't tell him, it was amazing to see how 2 of my students built almost identical approaches to analyzing, monitoring, and interacting with the athletes.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, using a basic scientific approach.
Yeah.
Which we did. And the really cool thing is I was hoping, my dream was that if I could come up with this healthy, safe, natural product, I was hoping that there wouldn't be a very significant decrease in their performance.
Right.
I hope that, okay, as long as they don't get too much worse,
right,
they'll live with it.
Because it's still going to be better for them.
That was my hope. However, what we found was there was actually an increase in performance.
Yeah.
Which, I was shocked to find. And then, over time we found that there was the short-term benefit, which I was hoping that at least it would be negligible. It was positive. And then as you can, it seems obvious to someone like you, but certainly over time, the benefit was huge because guys now were sleeping better. They were better hydrated, and they weren't dealing with gut dysbiosis and all this kind of stuff. So it actually turned out to be hugely positive.
And it seemed that they actually enjoyed the taste and the experience of consuming it. I mean,
they do now. I mean, I remember the first batch that I made. We had only 2 guys would drink it because it tasted so bad, and one of them came off after the first period and threatened my life if I ever gave him that shit again. So that was the first batch was not so good, but we're at a much better place now. But yeah, it's a bit of a process. Yeah.
Well, I know for a fact, because as you know, I do visit Canada every year. I've been lecturing at CanFit Pro for like 15 or 16 years consecutively now. I'm also best buddies with one of your best buddies, which is Rory, who was a therapist for the Raptors basketball team for 10 or 11 years. So 2 of my best buddies are inside the 2 main teams in Toronto, and I've consulted for both of those teams through you guys. But I forgot where I was going with that, but I know, my point is that I know that your products and your formulations achieved a very, very high level of respect and regard amongst athletes of all sports in Canada. And they're, if you ask somebody in a gym in Canada, what's the best performance nutrition, and BioSteel comes up, and there's, it's sort of a household brand amongst Canadian athletes. So I think you've been very, very successful in there. What were some of the inner challenges that you had to deal with through all this process in yourself, such as you mentioned one, not putting up with dictatorships and forcing athletes to do shit that you just knew was dumb anyhow. What are some of the other battles you had to come up with? Did you have issues like you talked about the nutrition? Someone saying, don't ever give me that shit again or I'll kill you. Did you have hard times, for example, getting athletes to realize that eating and sleeping and stabilizer exercises and not pushing yourself till you're dead, the whole no pain, no gain concept? What are some of the other challenges that you really had to work through to get people moving in the same direction and to get the level of results that you wanted to get for them?
Yeah, I you know what, I did, but not as much as some people would think if we're talking about the players, because at the end of the day, I was very lucky that that the first team that I came into to start working with, we had a fantastic group of guys. I think we had, my first year there, we had seven or maybe 8 guys that either had been a captain of another team or went on to be the captain of another team after they left us. So we had a lot of guys that had leadership qualities, and they bought into the concept that at the end of the day, I just want to make you healthier,
right.
which is a great sell. I had a lot more difficulty with the coaching staff. Not so much the first coaching staff. I worked for a guy by the name of Pat Quinn, who's no longer here with us. He's passed away, but he was a legend in the business, incredible guy that gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. But I did have difficulty sometimes with coaches, and again, breaking down that idea about instead of punishing them, instead of it being an us versus them mentality, we need to realize that we're all in this together. And that was always challenging for me, and I'm getting better at that. But that was a tough thing for me early on. But with the athletes, not so much. That's not to say I haven't had. There have been lots of guys along the way that didn't buy in or had their own way of doing things. But that was never a major problem for me. It was more to do with coaching, management, people like that. Yeah.
So if you look back on your career now, that's obviously very successful, not only as a strength and conditioning coach, but as a formulator of health and performance products and a businessman. Though you've told me that you're the formulator, you're not really the guy marketing and selling, but you still obviously have to have some business sense. You run a business. You run considerably the most successful strength and conditioning business in Canada.
Per square foot, anyway.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, Matt's referring to the fact that his gym is small, but he really likes that intimate atmosphere. And even though his gym is small, he does have a whole entire Olympic track, a football field, and a hockey arena right there. Walk out of the gym and into the hockey arena.
Which helps.
Yeah. So if you were to say, okay, if I had to summarize the nuggets, the gems, and write them down on a piece of paper to say to a young strength coach, these are the things you need to know, that I had to travel a lot of miles and speak to a lot of great experts and work to refine, so that here's the formula, like A squared plus B squared is C squared. If you burn yourself out, you burn yourself out. What would be, if Matt had his sort of pinnacle principles of training that you could pass on to the athletes listening, or the conditioning coaches, the therapists, the doctors, where would you say that these are some of the rules that you need to know? Because if you don't know, ignorance is not bliss. And if you break these rules, you're probably going to shorten your career or the athlete's career.
Well, I will say this. A I have a copy of How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy within arm's reach of every place I spend any significant amount of time. There's one on my desk at work. There's one on my desk at home. There's one next to the dining room table where I like to do work at home. It's always within arm's reach. And every single one of my professional athlete clients in the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, I've purchased for each of them a copy of that book. So, and the cool thing I like about, and that's not just a plug for the book, because you would say the same thing, is that you've told, and I've heard you say this before, like, my hourly consulting fee is it's exorbitant, it's very high.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just buy this book and do everything that's in the book, that's probably going to clear up 95% of your problems.
Yes, yeah.
If you just actually do it. So I mean, that would be one piece of advice I would absolutely say. But I think that I've been lucky. I've had some. I had one professional athlete client that's just retiring this year, who's been a client for this will be 18 years, 17 years. I've got an executive client, not a professional athlete. He's a guy who's run a very successful, hugely successful company in my country. He's been awarded the Order of Canada, which is a very big deal in our country. He's been a client for 20 years.
Wow.
So if you knew that this new client that you're meeting tomorrow, or this new patient that you're meeting tomorrow, whatever your business is, if you knew they were going to be your client for the next 20 years, would you conduct your business any differently? Would you treat them any differently? Would you behave differently? So I think that any of the choices that I've made in terms of how I should train my athletes, the recommendations or advice that I give them in terms of their nutrition or lifestyle, whatever, if I always just remember that, if I always just do what's best for them as a person,
yes,
what's going to be the best thing for them to keep them healthy and happy, inevitably that works out great for my business. And the really challenging and difficult thing is that I've had clients especially early on, when money was tight and I'm living paycheck to paycheck, I've turned clients away that I knew it wasn't going to be a good fit, which is a scary proposition.
It is, but that's being honest.
And you know what? In one client in particular, I remember giving them a check back 2 weeks into the process because they weren't ready for this. And it didn't go over well, as you can imagine. They were very insulted, but a year and a half later, this guy came back and he's been a client for 7 years since. So
that's great. I've had many cases like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, but I think that's something again that I think I've learned from you, is that idea of having a word that gets thrown around too often, holistic, but taking a holistic approach and making sure that I put together a program for each of my clients that I really believe is the best thing for them.
Yes.
Based on the goals that they've told me, based on my intuition of what I think that is best for them. But based on that, I don't think you can ever go wrong. Mm-hmm. I really believe that. So I think play the long game, have that long game in mind.
Yeah. I'm sure you've run into the issue where athletes and people come in and they've read or seen someone doing something stupid in the gym, which we call a fad. Yeah. And they're like, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. Have you run into that over and over again?
I have, but I'm at the point now in my career. So I have a very different business model. I don't accept clients per hour or per session or per day or per week. It's like it's kind of like going to Club Med, except I tell you what you're going to do every day.
Yeah.
You don't decide if you want to play volleyball. I'm going to tell you if we're playing volleyball or for playing shuffleboard. So
right.
I think it's good because I think at least I've established that myself now to say, okay, I'm like a fiduciary in the financial world, but a fiduciary for their health, where I would say, if we are both under the assumption that I have your best interests at heart,
yeah,
I care about you and I want what's best for you.
Yeah.
And you've shared with me your goals and I understand what those goals are. Mm-hmm. So if we can move forward with that understanding, then I'm just going to do what I think is best, and you just kind of have to buy in. And if you don't, this really isn't going to work. Which is not to say, I think that, if you look like, it's not a dictatorship. It's also not a democracy. It's an enlightened despotism.
Well, it's
so I'm going to ultimately, at the end of the day, you're paying me for a reason, because it's my responsibility is to get the result. You have to trust that I have your best interest at heart. I always welcome your feedback.
Yeah,
I'm always interested, but we're going to do it the way that I think is best.
Well, what you're describing is sort of a marriage between the concept of a coach and a mentor. Coach just says, do these exercises, hold your hockey stick that way, don't do that. But a mentor, for example, Customato, if you remember Mike Tyson's story,
yeah.
Mike Tyson was a lost kid, but Customato saw potential in him, but he became someone who helped him navigate his inner world and to realize that his pain and his anger could work against him. And lo and behold, when Customato died and he lost him, then the wheels went off, because Customato wasn't just a coach, he was a mentor for him. And it really appears to me, from being around you, seeing what's going on and seeing how these athletes relate to you, that you've married mentorship, life mentorship, with coaching. And that's why there's the sort of there's somewhat of a father archetype. I know what you're supposed to be doing because I've been doing this my whole career. And as much as you think you don't really know what you're talking about. That's why you're here. So let's talk about what it is that you want to do, and I'll see if we can find any logic or rationale in that.
Absolutely. And that, you know what, and that, all that being said, that's not to say that from time to time my athletes do come in and share with me something that they saw someone else do or their coach on their team showed them. And many times they show me some great ideas. And then it's my job to say, okay, you know what? That's actually a great idea, a great exercise, great plan, great supplement, great whatever. Can I show you where I think it would fit best into what we're doing?
Yes.
Which maybe is not today.
Right.
But, from time to time they'll bring it in and it's something I've never seen before. Well, that's great. Now I'm going to go research it and find out, because I want to make sure I'm staying current. I want to make sure that I know what it is. And every once in a while, we completely change the way that we're doing things because one of my athletes showed me something that they learned from someone else, which is better than what we're doing.
Yeah.
So now we're doing that. But we have a good enough relationship that before they will demand, I want to do A, B, or C, they'll bring it to me and say, hey, I've seen this. Mm-hmm. It's intriguing to me. I think I want to do it. Can you research it and find out if and when it would be appropriate for us to do that?
So I think one of the beautiful things that you're highlighting that's also an important life skill is that the teacher, to be successful, must always remain a student.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you don't have any students, you won't be a teacher for very long. You need students in the class. It's a symbiotic relationship to me, in that I can't be a coach unless I have athletes.
Yes.
Right? They're not going to be as successful without my help, but I won't be successful at all without them. So we need each other.
Yeah.
I wish I could be out on the field playing, but I can't.
Yeah.
So this is the next best thing. So I want to make sure that I'm helping them and that I'm doing right by them. But in order to do that, they need to cooperate with me. We need to work together.
Well, what I mean though is that, and I know you've met, I won't name any names, but both me and you know of someone that was quite famous that functioned this way, and that is, I know more than you, shut the fuck up, do what I tell you to do, or get the hell out of here, you pot-smoking hippie. So I think you know who that is. But that's a teacher that has not remained a student.
No, absolutely.
That's the Donald Trump method of ruling. Build a wall around anybody that disagrees with you and pretend they don't exist. But what I'm saying is that you've done a very good job of, as a teacher, being open to learning even from your athletes or the next door neighbor or some book on herbology, or wherever something useful comes, you find a way to look at it honestly and integrate it. And I think that's an absolutely essential quality if you want to stay in the game a long time, because as technology moves and as other strength coaches or professionals evolve, if we get to the point where we think we know everything, then we just become a barnacle, and next thing you know, we're outdated and we're shelved.
I really truly believe that if you asked about advice for young coaches or people starting out, the most important quality you could have to be successful in this business is humility.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, when I started out, I was exposed to guys like you, Mauro Di Pasquale, Eric Serrano, Ken Kanak, and I used to hang out with Rory. Rory and I would sit every day at the track center with Charlie Francis for about 2 or 3 years. That was a regular day for me. Yeah. That was regular stuff. So I've known since day one. I've seen greatness firsthand.
Yes.
And I've stood beside the platform at the London Olympics in the weightlifting championship. I've been at World Powerlifting Championships. I know where I am in the pecking order. I'm way down low. So I've always remained humble because I've seen greatness.
Yeah.
And I think it always reminds me that I can't know it all. You and I have been hanging out for the last 2 days here. I feel like I don't know what the hell I'm doing anymore. I feel like I'm back at square one.
That wasn't because I intended that by any means.
But you know what I mean? Like but I think having that humility to realize I don't know I don't know it all and I can't know it all. But
neither can I.
But what I can do is for my players, I can go and gather as much information as I can, synthesize it, and deliver it to them in a way that's going to help them be better. And just as I expect them to constantly be working at getting stronger and faster, I need to constantly be working at getting better at what I do as a coach.
Yeah. Because I've and maybe others, not just me, I don't want to be taking more credit than credit is due, but I'm leading to a point. You took nutrition and lifestyle coaching, which is now holistic lifestyle coaching with me. You and I have had many deep discussions about challenges with players, behavioral problems, life problems, depression, all that stuff. What have you learned as a strength coach about the importance of being aware of and interacting with athletes on a mental, emotional level, as opposed to just treating them like people that have to get a job done in a gym and shut the fuck up and do it and that kind of stuff?
Well, that's where I think I've been most successful. And again, I attribute that back to your teaching, is that I've had a lot of success with some athletes who have been written off.
Yes.
Because they were too difficult, they were too headstrong, they were wild, they were untamable, and I've had a lot of success with those people because, again, being able to cut through all the surface bullshit and get to the root of what is your goal, what's your dream.
Yeah.
Okay, well, based on that, here's where I can help you to achieve your dream.
Yeah.
Here's the things that I think you need to do. Are you willing to do them or not? And
yes.
Then let's work together. And again, that goes back to your, HLC programs, and I think that's been, a huge part of it for me, because at the end of the day, if you look at the world of professional sports, which is where I spend most of my time, how many cases are there of these athletes that they had all the talent in the world and they just couldn't make it, and no one knows why?
There's a lot of them.
So many of them. So and how many athletes are there out there that have self-destructive behaviors?
Yes.
And they've got everything is right there in front of them, but they just can't.
Cross
they've got
the threshold.
Nutrition or lifestyle habits or drugs and alcohol or gambling, whatever the case may be. And you think, well, how is it possible that this guy or girl could have everything right in front of them and they just keep self-sabotaging themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's everything. And those are the athletes, like the guys like me, who want to go to the gym every day and work super hard and they'll do whatever you ask, but don't have that much talent. That's not going to make your career. What's going to make your career is those other guys, if you can save them from destruction.
Yes.
If you can keep them healthy, that's going to make your career in this business.
Yeah.
Anyone can work with the guy who wants to work out every day. You just got to unlock the gym and lock it up when he's done.
Yes. And the other thing, as you know, just because you want to work out every day doesn't mean you have the mental, emotional strength or discipline to deal with the challenges of growing yourself as an athlete. As a martial artist, I can say, remember, heavy bags don't hit back. And dumbbells are easy to have relationships with. So you get a lot of guys that are great in gyms and training, but they don't do well in the challenges of relationships, either getting along with team members, team staff, or managing their own emotions with regard to the challenges of competition, such as how do you behave when you're 3 points down and you got 3 minutes on the clock, So, the physical element is really, it's kind of like if you have a car with a lot of horsepower, but you're an emotionally unstable driver, you're probably going to crash the car. You'll look great in a drag race, but when it comes to being an ambulance driver or a cop that has to maintain their composure while driving fast, you could be very dangerous. Which leads to my next question. I know this is sort of a big envelope, but I'm just curious to see where you go with it. What is your perspective of spiritual development and how that relates to the work you do with athletes?
Yeah, that's a tough topic to deal with. I grew up Catholic, which is I understand the difference now between religion and spirituality. Those are two different things, which I learned later in life. But I think that for a lot of athletes, that sort of a conversation is taboo with your strength coach. That's not something you're there to talk to your strength coach about. But obviously, it's the most important thing. I've had how many athletes have we seen that have squandered everything they had, that have committed suicide, that have had their careers tanked because they couldn't control their behaviors and their emotions and
or
things
their
like
dick.
that. Yeah, exactly. So, again, that's probably that's the real magic right there if you can do it, and it's also the hardest thing for me to get a pulse on myself. So I think that having something that you've really impressed upon me is that everybody needs to have some sort of grounding in that, and they have to have some sort of spiritual practice, whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
And everyone has a different definition of that.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not an expert, and I'm working on that daily myself. You know? So, I think that maybe my humility would kick in at that point and say, hey, you know what? I'm happy to share with my athletes my journey and what I'm thinking about, but I'm still very, I'm still very naive, and I'm still very new in my journey. So I'm certainly not an expert in that, but I think at the end of the day, my business is an interesting one because I have the majority of my clients are professional athletes or guys who are on the cusp of becoming professional athletes and aspire to be. And the other clients I have are very successful, at least financially, businessmen. They're either entrepreneurs who have, started and sold very successful companies.
Yeah.
C-suite level execs, guys that are making huge dollars, but they're unhappy.
Yes.
They're unhealthy, and they're miserable, and they're angry. And it's, again, you come back to, okay, all my clients, these guys, especially if I look at some of these young professional athletes, every girl would like to sleep with these guys. Every guy would like to hang out with these guys. Whatever kind of car you dream about, they got two of them.
Yeah.
That house that you've seen on TV or in the magazine, they got two of those. They got every cool watch. They got all the cool, but they're unhappy. So there is that piece that goes beyond any of this stuff. You know? That despite all those very surface level trappings, the monetary trap, that even with all that, surely these people must be happy.
Yeah. That's the illusion, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that's when you see, like, and I have, clients who are billionaires, and you see, okay, well, you really have at that point every possible thing that money could buy you. Are you ultimately happy? Is life full and abundant and joyful every day? And if it's not, then what else is there?
Well, there's an old saying. Joseph Campbell says most people spend their life climbing the ladder to get to the top, and when they get to the top, they realize the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall.
I've never heard that before.
And what that means is they chased after money, they chased after fame, they chased after success, they got to being the president of the corporation, but they found themselves empty and realized they spent their whole life doing things that ultimately weren't fulfilling to their heart or to their soul, their inner being, and that's a midlife crisis right there, or a heart attack, or depression. Yeah. Spirituality can really be simplified down into the concept of spirituality means, in its essence, connecting to a greater whole. So if it's all about you, and it's all about money, and it's all about success, you really aren't connecting to the greater whole. There's an old saying, there's no I in we. So if you are too alpha male in your relationships with your spouse, or you're too demeaning of people as a strength coach or a therapist or a teacher, and it's too dictatorial, it's all I. So the greater step from I is we. And there you see the importance of the relationship between your athletes and you, and the importance of saying, I am the one who makes the final decision because you hired me to do that, but I'm also open to listening to any concepts, ideas, or requests or challenges that you're having. So there you see you're actually opening the door for a lot of these young, headstrong athletes to go from an I to a we relationship and creating a safe place for them to actually have a mentor that they can trust. And then once we grow from I to we, and we realize the importance of relationships and how valuable they are for love, because at the end of the day, what is money without love? What is success without love? What is fame without love? It's empty. It's dead-end road. Then we come to the point where we realize we've learned something in the journey from I to we, and we want to give back to the all. So, you're 44, we've gone through the hero's journey with you. It always comes in spirals. So we reach a point, we've made a level of success, we have that sense of, I finally made it. I got to the top of the ladder, but then there's another ladder. So when you look at the reality of the spiral of spiritual growth and development, because, spirit always wants to become what it truly is, which is unconditional love. So as long as we're working with conditions or predetermined outcomes, or I got to do this, or I got to have that, we have a journey to go. And it's a long journey spiritually, Where's your ladder now? What's your next climb?
Wow.
Where's your next stage of growth and development?
Wow. I have to think about that for a second. It's so true what you said, and I know, like, I can really, as an entrepreneur and a small business owner,
yeah,
that's exactly what it is every day. It's the minute you feel like, okay, finally I'm good, I made it, and then all of a sudden the next day you're right into full crisis mode, and the sky is falling, and life is shit, and I'm just gonna close this place up and go get a job at Starbucks, and that's
and then you have to remember everything you tell your athletes every day to
and
apply it to yourself.
As a business owner yourself, you know exactly how that is.
Oh, yes.
And I've people talk about this concept of life balance. I think it's a crock of shit. I don't think there is anything. I don't think there's balance. I think that you spend your time and attention and your love and focus on one thing, and it grows. And when you're doing that, you realize there's another thing that you've neglected, and you got to go back and divert some of your attention. So
yeah,
I think that I've spent a lot of time and energy on different things, and I think right now my private business is in a very good place. But I've actually had to go back and learn how to be a better businessman. Learn how to make sure that that business is running smooth and sound, and shore that up.
Yeah.
We're always tinkering with the way that our programs and the way that we train our athletes, and I think as much success as we've had. I look back at our programs in the last year, and I've decided we're actually, instead of trying to grow the business in terms of the volume of clientele that we see, we've actually cut it back a little bit, because I really want to make sure that we're doing a better job in refocusing, and I think with a couple of different aspects of our program, we're revamping the way that we do things. So, man, I don't know, for me personally, it's I haven't yet had that moment where I feel like, okay, I'm done. I made it. I went all the way around the board. I passed go. I collected my $200. I'm done. I've had moments where I felt like I was right there. And then I think you just keep moving that finish line a little bit. Maybe that's
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like if there's a next destination, in other words, inside of you said, if I can accomplish this with my business or my life, then I know now that's going to bring me a level of fulfillment. And that because I'm aware of that, if I don't do it, I can see that I'm actually holding myself back, and therefore holding everybody I work with and relate to.
I can tell you one thing. I've spent 2 days at Heaven House here. I know it's on that's what's going on my board now. That's I got to find my own Heaven House.
Yes.
But you know what? I'm gonna have to think about that question a little further.
Well, that's okay. Maybe that's the point of the interview, is just for me to help you do that. There's 2 points.
So if anybody listening thinks this is a staged interview with pre-planned questions, you now have official proof that I have no answer for the question. I have to go back and think about it.
Yeah, this is what I call a dialogue, or what a dialogue is. The word discussion means to chop up. So a discussion is, Matt, these are the 3 phases of a lift. What do you think? Well, I disagree with that. But a dialogue is, what do you think of the concept of love? Well, Paul, this is what love means to me. Oh, yes, I've had that experience too, but this love also has some real hooks and teeth, and that's what we're doing. We're dialoguing. We're just sharing our experience together because we've had over 20-year experience together, and it's not like we're on the phone to each other every 5 minutes, but there's been pivotal times in your career where you wanted my help or my advice. And there's been times in my career where I got the levity and the joy when things were going hard for me of coming to Toronto and seeing how you were applying what I taught you and seeing how well it was working. And those types of experiences help me through the hard times because I've hit hard times financially. I've had to fire key instructors that I really thought I had a great relationship and only found out later I was getting the big green weenie, as we used to say in the Army. In other words, there's painful things, and sometimes the road can be so hard that you get so used to getting blisters from the plow, you forget to look around and realize, wow, I run across Matt, or I run across Rory, or I run across a lot of my students and see the amazing work they're doing. And because I've been doing this for 35 years, sometimes I forget how much of an influence I had. So getting to see you all these years and seeing you really growing and applying this, it kept my balloon expanding so I could keep rising during tough times. And one of the things you said, it gave me a chance to share a concept that you might find interesting and the listeners might find interesting. You said the concept of balance is bullshit or I can't remember how you worded it, but that you were saying how, this is going on and oh my God, that's going on. But I'm going to hopefully help you have a different perspective of that.
I'm sure you will. You always do.
If you're doing a deadlift with 2.5 times your body weight, when the bar comes off the floor, where's your center of gravity? Is it inside your body or outside of it?
Well, I guess I would say inside, but I guess the barbell. The obvious answer is outside, but
well, if you weigh 225 pounds and you're deadlifting 500 pounds, there's over twice your weight. See, if you weighed 250 and you're deadlifting 500, if you're standing up in front of the bar, your center of gravity is right in front of your sacrum. So if you just go right behind your belt buckle and about halfway between your sacrum and your belt buckle, your center of gravity is sitting right in there, right? Then when you bend down and grab onto the bar, don't you now become one with 500 pounds? So imagine if you had 500 pounds of mass wrapped around you like a giant lead belt, then the mass would still be inside your body. You with me?
Yep.
But when the bar is on the ground in front of you, the instant you try to lift that bar off the ground, do you see that your center of gravity, because now it's part of your body, if there's 250 pounds of man and 500 pounds of bar, your center of gravity is actually hovering somewhere between the bar and your feet.
Okay.
You visualize that?
I'm with you.
So now if you take a high jumper, when a high jumper jumps over a 7-foot 4-inch bar and they're arching their back, their head's on one side of the bar and their feet's on the other side of the bar, can you see that their center of gravity is somewhere between their head and their feet?
Yes.
It's actually not even in their body.
Yep.
You visualize that?
Yep.
If you're standing on your feet and I hand you a 40-pound dumbbell and say abduct your arm until your arm's parallel with the floor, that 40-pound load now took 40 pounds and moved it up and laterally. So do you see that your center of gravity is being pulled up and to the side, and if you don't counterbalance, it'll pull you right over off your feet. So if we look at this concept of I'm doing this and all of a sudden hell breaks loose over here, I'm standing here and the bar's in front of me. Can you see that if we look at life's events, that we have to learn to be aware of where the action is around us that's ultimately pulling us in some direction. And if we don't pay attention, for example, how many times have you seen somebody start off with smoking a little bit of pot and saying, oh, I only do it once in a while? Then a month later, it's a joint 5 times a day. Then they're smoking pot all the time. Or they say, oh, I'm only doing cocaine once in a while. And the next thing you know, they're doing it 5 times a week. And the next thing you know, they're starting their day with a line. And the next thing you know, they're doing it before they get on the rink or they come to the gym, right? So you see what I'm showing you is that when those people aren't paying attention to how the center of gravity of themselves is moving, they find themselves way off into a snare before they even realize it was there. So what I'm leading to is, if we think of 4 doctors, what is happy making for us? And are we taking responsibility for doing that for ourselves instead of expecting somebody else to do it? How much rest do we need? And do we take time to look into our inner life to see what's really going on there? Or do we just get pissed off at people and blame it on them? Is the way we're eating producing the vitality, the recovery, and the satiation that we need? And are we using movement to produce the results that we want? So if you take a human being and break them up into these 4 components, which I know you already do, we've talked about that and I've watched you doing it, can you see that someone who's not aware of the effects of diet can't see, as they keep drinking soda pop and caffeine, that the center of gravity is moving out of their body, and if it goes too far, it'll topple them? Can you see that if you make excuses and stay up too late and party because you're a famous athlete and you're sexing all night and partying all night because you're still acting like a teenager and you don't realize you have a responsibility to the team, that your center of gravity is moving out of your body? If you've got happy making, you got movement, you got diet, and you got rest and introspection. Spirituality is the willingness to be aware of how each of those factors are affecting you so you can see where your center is being drawn and say, the reason I'm not sleeping is because I'm eating too much sugar at night. I'm aware that Matt taught me that if you eat too much sugar at night, it screws up your blood sugar management, which results in blood sugar highs and blood sugar lows, which results to cortisol being released, which is preceded by adrenaline, which then suppresses melatonin, and then you lay all in bed all night staring at the ceiling and you wake up exhausted and you got to go perform as an athlete, which never works very well. So because a person has that little bit of awareness, they're more like a bloodhound who can smell trouble coming. So spirituality, in a grand theme, says, what are the most important things in my life? Taking care of myself so I can be that person, eating effectively, sleeping effectively, recognizing that I am 50% of every one of my relationships, and my relationships are contributing to bigger things, be it a team or a company or a school or a nation, right? National hockey team, right? You're playing to represent the entire country of Canada. The national powerlifting team, or the world champion. The world champion is the one person who, by definition, has now got the most influence on the world because he's proven, or she's proven, that they are the best in the world. So there's your spirituality. Remember I said spirituality is realizing your connection to a greater whole, and life is like an onion. I in the middle, we next to it, all outside of it. My core self, my ego, my sense of what I want. Well, right next to that is, are you doing something about it? Are you making choices? Are you working for money just so you have money and prostituting your happiness? And so now you, like we've talked about, you got a bunch of money, but you're depressed. So do you see that balance isn't something that you can weigh and measure on a schedule? Because the things that we have to weigh and measure on the schedule are as much mental emotional as they are physical. The how much money I have has to be balanced out with, am I happy inside? And is that money being used in ways that actually create freedom, or is it binding me because I'm addicted to making more and more? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So really, what spirituality is becoming sensitive to the parts of yourself that can't be weighed and measured, and sensitive to the effect you're having on others and they on you in relationships, so you can move a piece on the chessboard before you're in checkmate and your wife's asking for a divorce or you're getting kicked off a hockey team because you keep showing up drunk.
That was powerful.
Well, so my last question is if you have a message that you could share after all these years of climbing the ladder and growing yourself and developing yourself, and you said, okay, let's say you were going to die tomorrow, what would be the one or two things that you'd like to share with everybody that you could say was the synthesis of your life's lessons in the 44 years you've been here in Earth School?
I think the greatest compliment I think anyone paid me was one of my a guy who's, if you're from Canada or you're a hockey fan, you'd know the name Ken Dryden. He was a famous guy, but he told me once that I was a teacher who cares, which I think is about the best compliment anyone could have gave me. And I think if anyone can do that, it really doesn't matter if you're a strength coach or a therapist or a doctor or a nutritionist or a chiropractor or whatever, whatever your job is or profession, the thing that the title that you call yourself or that other people identify with you. I think if you can, if that's something you can do, if you can help other people that way, that's something that's a very honorable thing. And I've tried to do that, and I continue to try to do that, and I hope I've done it, and I hope I do a better job of it. I think that the lessons that I've learned, both through the formal education process at the CHEK Institute and the informal education of being able to spend time with you and get to know you, is helped me to become a healthier, happier, more well-rounded person, and it's helped me to help others do that. And I think that regardless of what your profession is, that'll set you up for success. And
so that really what you're saying is find a mentor.
I mean, first of all, you know what? As you just finished saying, you got to find something that you love and you're passionate about, because you know what? You're never going to be really successful at anything
if you're not passionate.
No, and we talked, we were laughing about this idea of the overnight success, and you've been at this a whole lot longer than I have, but I've been at this for 21 years and grinding away and working my ass off, and having lots of happy moments and accomplishments along the way, but never, I feel like every time I'm getting closer to the top of that ladder, even if it's against the right wall, someone's been cutting the rungs out below. It's just, it's this never-ending. It's a never-ending journey. I wouldn't say it's a never-ending battle. It's not a battle. It's a journey. It's a journey. But if you don't truly love what you're doing and you're not really passionate about it, it's never going to work for you, regardless of the amount of money you might make. Yeah. You're going to wake up one day and hate yourself, and life's too short for that. So pick something that you're passionate about. Pick something that you love. Find mentors. Find other people that have been successful, whose message resonates with you. Mm-hmm. But then, and you've helped again with this, and have those mentors, learn from them, study from them, but work on yourself so that you can choose what aspects of that message resonate best with you, synthesize that information, and deliver it in a method that's effective for the population of people that you work with. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And congratulations on all your success. I'm very grateful that I got to have a little piece in it. And
much bigger than a little piece.
Well, it's just, I know how many great minds you've worked with. So I personally don't want to take more credit, because I know you integrate a lot of great minds' ideas. I'm grateful that I could contribute some pieces. It's been a great joy for me to be a consultant to you over the years and help you with challenging situations and athletes. It's also been great, too. We talked about spirituality, but one of the things that wasn't mentioned is you have me come in now and then and take professional athletes and teach them stuff. And that last time it was breathing techniques and Tai Chi.
We should talk about that. I mean, I can tell you that, for the listeners out there, Paul, anytime he comes into Toronto, especially during the summertime when all my professional athletes are there, he's kind enough to come in. And sometimes it's just Paul and I hanging out in the gym. Sometimes it's Paul and I getting a workout in. Sometimes it's Paul running all of my professional athletes through some breathing exercises or Tai Chi or whatever. But never once have you ever come in where I didn't have at least one, and usually it's several athletes, have a life change. I don't mean a great workout. I'm not talking about a great workout. I'm not talking about a fun experience. I'm not talking about a learning experience. I'm talking about a true life-changing experience. Where I have guys whose lives were profoundly impacted for the better, and who have changed the way they look at life, who've changed the way that their goals and dreams in life based on their interaction with you. And it's the great thing is, and this, all of my clients have a copy of your book. Some of my clients have been and attended lectures. I've brought them with me, and they all know who you are. But every time you come, I let them know, Paul Chek's going to be here on Tuesday sometime between 9 and noon. I don't know when he's coming, and I don't know what the hell he's going to do. So it's not, there's no expectation.
Yeah.
They might come in and you might just be deadlifting. They might come in and you're going to do Tai Chi or Qigong, and they show up and everyone has a different takeaway from that experience. But it's a profound, it's the impact, to see the impact that it has on these guys. And these guys, they have lots of great coaches. They have great strength and conditioning coaches they work with on their team. I'd like to think that I'm a pretty good strength coach.
You are.
They're exposed to so many things. And some of these guys, to see the reaction, to see where these guys, it's just an aha moment for them where they realize this is something completely different. This is not just a different type of doing a barbell curl or a different way of doing an exercise or a different nutritional idea, some fad of the day. It's not that. This is a whole different level of information. That's really cool for me to be able to share. It gives me great joy to share that, because it was so impactful for me to share that with my guys. And I've got one athlete in particular that I could tell you about that, he's a guy that now he's surpassed me. I mean, this is a guy that, if I had a crisis and you weren't available, he's my next call. Yeah. And this guy was my athlete. He was my student. Yeah. But that's really cool to see what these guys have taken it and run with it. And now they're coming back to me with, hey, I heard Paul Chek talk about this book. I read it. It was really good. And I think, well, shit, I didn't even read that one yet. Or, hey, Paul gave me this idea for this and that. It's really, really cool to see.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me share in their lives and in your life. And it's, this is what really makes life meaningful and rich, right? This is 21 or 22 years you and I have been working with the reality of the world together and growing ourselves and learning to live better and love better and share more. So, hey, we're not dead yet, baby. We got a long way to go. I know I said that would be my last question, but here's my last question. If you looked into an imaginary crystal ball and asked yourself, where do I want to be in 20 years from now? Where are you headed?
Well, you know what? We'll be having this conversation at my heaven house.
Good.
Somewhere. I'll be showing you my facility there, and you're going to be making the espresso.
Okay, I like it.
I think that's an unrealistic goal for me to make better espresso than you. I can try, but I think that's I think it would be me and my family being happy and healthy, and I love. It's already starting now, but I love seeing the athletes that I've coached are now coaching professional teams and managing professional teams, and I feel like that's my ability to affect a change greater than I could ever do myself, and to see these guys going out in the world and having happiness and success and health, and I hope there's just more of that to come. So
probably by the sound of it, when you get to the point where you're ready to not do so much up close and in the fire, that because you have produced so many of these guys that are now out there on big teams, sounds like maybe you'll fall back into more of a consulting role and just pick and choose your work as you want to.
I think so. And again, that's what you do. I mean, there are players, very, very famous, world famous athletes that I've helped that have never met you, but you've impacted them and you've changed their life dramatically because of the things that you taught me and helped me to show them. Yeah. So I think really it's, as you grow and evolve and progress in your career, you have so much of a bigger reach now because you've impacted, guys like me and shared that message with me that I can then go out and share with the world, and those people can again share it with their network of people. It's really powerful.
That's what love is, isn't it?
I like that.
At the end of the day, that's what love is. Without that desire to share and the joy of seeing other people grow and accomplish and flower and become fulfilled, then what do we have? What do you really have? As I say, who gives a shit if you can squat 800 pounds if you can't get along with your wife and your kids? Or you can't maintain healthy relationships with your friends or the people that are trying to teach you and grow you. Now you're just a meathead. And I think, one of my dreams has always been to create intelligent athletes and athletes that have love and respect for each other and know that the ultimate accomplishment is to share the best of you with everyone else so that they can share the best with them. And I can tell you for sure you've done that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
What a great chance to share time together in heaven. And I wish you all the best of success. I will see you when I'm in Toronto later in the year for Can Fit Pro, and hopefully I'll come hang out with you guys. And
absolutely.
I'll try to remember to pick you an espresso up on the way in.
I can't wait.
All right, bud. And
Thank
where
you.
can people find you if they want to learn more about you or what you have to offer, or even consider coming and training with you if they're a professional athlete or even an elite athlete?
www.mattnichol.com or Twitter and Instagram. I'm trying to slowly integrate myself into that world. As you know, that's not my.
Me either.
I didn't grow up with any of that stuff, so I'm. I'm on Instagram, on Twitter, and all that good stuff.
Okay, well, Matt, I doubt this will be our last interview. So
I sure hope not.
Until the next time. Keep doing the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Matt Nichol. You can follow Matt on Instagram at Matt_Nichol or on Twitter at M_Nichol. His website is mattnichol.com. That's MattNichol.com. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living 4D Podcast or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living 4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com and the CHEK Institute's blog at chekinstitute.com/blog.